Hey everyone, Tim here from SnapAttack. Let's dig into this week's Threat Snapshot. So I always love a good case study. It's interesting to me to see how a threat actor moves through a network and how they change up their tradecraft to obtain their objectives. So the case study we're going to look at today is called A 5-Day Job, and this is about BlackByte ransomware that was observed by Microsoft's incident response team. Pieces of this that are interesting to me in particular. So I always tell our customers, ransomware just didn't appear magically in the network. So really looking at how they, get initial access, how they move laterally, how they escalate privileges, all of those other, very detectable opportunities, which again could have ultimately prevented the destructive ransomware activity, is really something important to keep in mind. The other thing when I look at this, particularly with the defender's lens in my perspective, is trying to figure out, how do I defend against this sort of attack? And rather than try and boil the ocean, breaking these down into smaller discrete TTPs and seeing, hey, do I have coverage for this? And do I have coverage for that? I always like to say, if we can take as many moves off the chessboard as we can for an attacker, we're really going to limit the activity and limit their chances of success for, their threats and their campaigns. So without further ado, let's take a little look-see here at this threat in this case study. So this was, again, from earlier this month in July. Within those 5 days, the incident response team saw a threat actor gain initial access through unpatched Microsoft Exchange servers. So, Proxy Shell, not Proxy Shell, are still live and well, folks. Patch your systems. They were using, again, that web shell deployment and some other methods to, have a backdoor and gain that initial access. Lots of living off the land tools, little mix of Cobalt Strike, which we've seen through, a lot of threat actors as their C2 of choice. Some additional defense evasion techniques, and then ultimately leading to the ransomware deployment itself. So again, lots of detection opportunities here. I know 5 days can be a short timeline, can be a long timeline, really depends how you look at it. But there's lots of different activity here that we can, alert on that could, identify this activity before we get to the ransomware itself. So let's take a look at some of these individually. And like I said, it's ideal not to try and boil the ocean. So it's going to be really fast. We're going to kind of just touch on a lot of these topics. We do have snapshots, deep diving a lot of these too, so feel free to kind of scroll through our library and see what else we have. I know we've covered Proxy Shell before, Proxy Shell being a remote code execution vulnerability across Microsoft Exchange servers. Pretty powerful, pretty simple because it is unauthenticated. So we've got a Kali attacker, we've got a Windows machine here. You're going to see we've got, again, publicly available exploits that have been around for years now. And all we really need to do is have, information about an account. So the IP address and a mailbox. This is going to, bypass the authentication. It's going to kind of go through, do its attack, and then eventually we'll see here that there is a shell that exists on that machine because of the context that this is running as. You can see this is running under the system account. Nothing interesting is going to really happen on the victim, although we're going to see here that this proxy shell dropped this ASPX web shell, so we can see that activity here. In terms of detection opportunities, I know there's a lot. We're just going to kind of cover one for each of these to keep this light. Suspicious commands in an IIS directory, and really looking for kind of general web shell activity. So if we see something in IIS's web root spawning CMDs or PowerShells, we can see here this is an example of Proxy Shell, Proxy Logon, not Proxy Shell, other variants. And again, this would also detect kind of more generic web shell activity if that got on there some other way. So good detection opportunity here. Another interesting one to highlight here. So this is something that was new to me. So threat actors have been using this new Exchange certificate PowerShell commandlet to essentially write the web shell code to the web root. This is, again, a little stealthier way of writing a file to the file system, and again, it's just a little bit more of an interesting attack vector. So We can see here how this is replicated. Again, if we're thinking about this more in the context of an attacker, they're probably going to be doing this, from a remote machine. We're just going to kind of do this here on, the victim. So we've got the web shell. We're going to, basically paste that contents here in with this PowerShell commandlet. And you're going to see that a file is then written to, again, whatever folder we want. In this case, it could be the web shell directory. And this is going to allow us to, install this web shell backdoor. So if you have remote code execution, rather than placing an ASPX file directly, they're going to, again, drop this file, typically with, it's going to have a file extension with a .req. So you're going to see that end up here. But this is, again, a little bit different, little stealthier way of, creating that file. And ultimately, then that can be used as a backdoor. So, this detection is going to be looking at, your PowerShell logs, 4104, looking for, really any indications of this new Exchange certificate. You could kind of further fine tune this to see where they're writing this to. Again, this is interesting to me, writing to like a C $ share, but you could also see this again being written to, in this case, it's the, OA web directory. So this would be again, another interesting way of detecting that. Persistence. So sometimes tried and true methods work. Registry Run Keys. I'm sure we've covered this. I'm sure you've seen this. This is, again, nothing new. Windows has lots of built-in ways to, have persistence for, legitimate uses. In this case, a lot of times registry run keys to have it start once or start every time with the system. The detections there, again, these are just known keys. So this is a Sigma community detection that's going to look for any modification to, software Windows current version. You're going to see run once, and other persistence, techniques. This one, again, has some, false positive reduction and fine tuning here. Very common technique, definitely something to have in your arsenal. Moving on, Cobalt Strike. Man, I could definitely do a whole snapshot on this, and I know we have lots of things that Cobalt Strike has built in, lots of tools that you can kind of bring in. We're just going to kind of focus here for this snapshot on kind of the very basics. So Cobalt Strike's implant is called Beacon. Really, it's up to the attacker to figure out how they're going to load that. That could be a service executable, an EXE, a DLL. It could be, reflectively injected. That's really the point when Cobalt Strike is the most vulnerable, is that initial access piece. And there are some, indicators that, definitely light up if the attacker isn't, changing some of the default behaviors. One I would like to highlight here is Cobalt Strike's named pipes. So this is a way that it does some of the internal communication, and you're going to see here some of these. So they have like your post-exploitation commands, your agent commands, some other things here, and you're going to see, especially if you have visibility into this, these pipes being created. They do randomize a little bit of the pipe name, so that is something to kind of keep in mind here. But this MSSE server one with the ID is a tried and true detection for Cobalt Strike activity. I know we've also talked about them living off of the land. So AD-Find is a common, administrative tool used by, system administrators, also used and abused by attackers to perform reconnaissance and, again, look for, enumerate users, understand domain, configurations and things. So it's a way of querying and interacting with Active Directory. We have a Windows victim, we have an attacker, or really a domain controller here. We can see ourselves running a couple of commands here. So this is just going to run AD-Find to, query users or person objects within Active Directory. Lots of ways that you can detect this. One that I'm going to call out that is interesting is this one from Sigma Community, renamed AD-Find Execution. So this is a little bit different because it is looking for, all of those command line keywords, but to help reduce false positives, it's saying that the image cannot be AD-Find. And I was a little bit surprised when I was going through this earlier why this was hitting on these events. So give people a moment to say, if I'm not looking for AD-Find and the process name is AD-Find, why is this hitting? And drum roll. Okay, so this is a Windows 4688 event. So again, because of compatibility, this process event can translate to, Windows 4688. 4688 doesn't have an image, so again, this would really be more of a compilation quirk. Still a good detection, still something you can use. In fact, I would probably remove that not altogether and audit any sort of AD find activity in my network. Again, that would probably be a little bit more of a hunt query than an alert based on, again, legitimate use cases here. But yeah, I would want to know if a user is going to, drop AD find. They don't necessarily have to rename it, and this detection wouldn't work if it was renamed, or it wasn't renamed. So there is that. Mimicats, again, everyone knows this. We've, done deep dives on it. Thing that I'm highlighting here is just we do have, partnership with Mandiant. You can run Mandiant security validation modules in your environment, and we have SnapAttack detections that can help you defend and detect those sort of activities. So we've got a version of Mimicats here, kind of our tried and true commands where we're going to get the SE debug privilege, and then we're going to use the logon passwords to dump credentials. So again, you could see that activity here in SnapAttack. Not going to really kind of cover all of that. Lots of different ways that you can detect Mimicats. My personal favorite is looking at, process access flags. Couple of more easy, low-hanging fruit ones. Sigma Community has, process creation events. This one actually is, this one is looking for all of the process access maps too. So you can see different tools here and how they are, interacting with LSASS, those permissions that they're requesting. So this is definitely an interesting detection. If you don't have process access availability, again, that might not be a telemetry or log source that you have, you can still also use and rely on, Mimicat's command line process event information, looking for common, keywords and things like, again, the logon passwords or privilege debug or things of that nature. Definitely will still detect across a lot of different commands, even variations. So this is a PowerShell invoke Mimikatz, but again, we're still going to see Mimikatz command lines and things executed here. All right, last and not least, BlackByte ransomware. So this is one that we had from an earlier sample. Again, these ransomware kind of groups and actors usually do change techniques. So, mileage may vary a little bit here. This one was from, again, another interesting incident. I can kind of go through, play this a little bit. You can see, BlackByte launching. Really the most interesting part to me is going to be on the process graph with a lot of these tools. So they are using, again, built-in, scripting languages, so WScript or C-script, in this case WScript, and they're launching a, JS file here. So you can see the execution of the sample, and again, these techniques generally tend to have a lot of living off the land. So we're going to see WScript launching C-script with that, and then we're going to see a ton of commands. We're going to see some net things where they're doing some enumeration. We're going to see them doing SC to query various, telemetry sources there. I'm not even going to enumerate all of these things, but you can see a lot of different activity that they have here. So again, there's going to be lots of detection opportunities for this itself. And again, this is even before, the BlackByte ransomware is doing its, encryption payload or other routines. So how would I detect this at the most basic level? And again, this works for kind of other malwares, probably a more generic evergreen detection. Again, let me just audit any, JS or VBA, VBS type script executions in a network. Use that for a hunt query, and that can also lead to a lot of other interesting behaviors too in your network. So that's our threat snapshot. Again, really interesting to see how we can take a larger case study, break that down into smaller, more actionable pieces. SnapAttack really helps accelerate those sort of things, so feel free to sign up for a demo. This is a weekly series, so like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.